We got Donald Trump calls out government waste. This is a whole press conference, and Donald Trump is talking about this government waste. It's about time they get to this conversation of the pure fraud. That's what Donald Trump calls it. He calls it pure fraud. And it's about time we get to that part, because who did it? Who's responsible? And are they going to be held responsible? Elon Musk was on Joe Rogan, and he was talking about Doge found $2 billion and then gave it to whoever. It was lost. $2 billion was lost somehow. And then they found it, and they were like, well, here you go. And now that can be spent on. It's like, no. Who lost it? If it's in a location, who put it in the location? I'm not talking about cash. There's obviously something digital that happened here. But when are people getting held responsible for that? Now, I don't know what's in this whole clip, but let's just start it off. Let's see where they're at.
Cabinet room, and here's the president.
We're on our way to some tremendous numbers. I think, first of all, many companies are now moving into the United States. They're coming back. Some of them left us from many years ago, decades ago, and they're all coming back. We have probably identified maybe $4 trillion worth of companies moving back or going to move back. Many of them have announced it's going to be tremendous jobs, high-paying jobs too. And you probably know the chip business, not because of the CHIPS Act, which was a disaster. You gave billions of dollars to companies that already have many billions of dollars. They said, thank you very much. It was no incentive for them to use it. But what is good is the tariffs will make it so that they want to come back. That's why they're coming back. I think they're coming back because of the election that took place on November 5th and because of the fact that they have to come back because the tariffs are forcing them to come back. And remember, there are no tariffs if you build here, and that's a big factor. So we have record numbers. Howard was just telling me the numbers that we're talking about are crazy, beyond anybody's wildest expectation. So they'll be doing a lot of building, all sorts of businesses, including the basics of automobiles. We have, as you know, Honda is coming in with a massive plant to Indiana, but there are many plants that are happening, and literally some are started already. General Motors is already redoing plants that were half abandoned, or they have plants that weren't being fully utilized. They're going to be, they and others are going to be making parts and other things in those plants so that it's one-stop shopping finally. It's ridiculous. You had to go to Mexico, you had to go to Canada, a car went all over the place. It was like, I don't know how that would have worked, but that's the way it sort of ended up. We had a deal, and we have a deal, which is fine, but people took advantage of the deal. They cheated. And when you cheat, the deals are unfortunate. But now what's happening is the numbers are beyond our wildest expectations. Now, having to do with cutting, we've done a lot of cutting from people, ideally the people that aren't doing the job. In many cases, people weren't attending jobs. In some cases, in many cases, people didn't exist. They had on the government rolls people that don't even exist. But of the ones that did exist, as you know, many didn't come to work. Many had no intention of coming to work. Many were paid and working someplace else. There were lots of bad scenarios, but they're being weeded out, and I think we're probably ahead of schedule on that. And to me, something that was just...
People were getting money that didn't exist. See, that's the type of thing I mean. How did that happen? Because either the person was completely fabricated, which in that case, who fabricated them? Like, they must have been put into the system at some point in time. So who did that? And if they did exist, and then, condolences, they pass away, well, then who was supposed to stop the payments? And if they didn't stop the payments, where were the payments going? And if the payments were going somewhere, who was taking the money? That's the part that everybody wants to get to. People, and you can't, Trump's doing an amazing job. What is this, month 3? What is it? Is it that? Are we even there yet? Has it even been 100 days? Like, I don't think it has. But the thing about it is, a lot of people have heard so much about the fraud, so much about the waste, that they're at a point where someone should be held responsible. You know, you would think it would be, we found a fraud here. Now it's time for someone to be identified. They're held accountable. I thought it would be a process like that, but it just seems to be finding thing after thing, and there's no one attached to any of it. And that can't be right. There has to be people attached to it. Again, you can't rush the guy, and I get that completely. But at what point are we going to hear who did what? You know what I mean? You know?
Terrible is the contracts that we're finding, the fraudulent contracts that we're finding where millions and millions of dollars and even billions of dollars in some cases were given out. And I think we'll start with that. I'd like to start with Doug Burgum, Secretary of the Interior. He told us about a couple of contracts that we have now found. When he got there, they saw this with Chris and everybody, and they couldn't believe it. Doug, could you just relate what you told us a little while ago?
No, happy to, Mr. President. There's a federal consulting group, which was a group inside of Interior, but it was managing contracts from many different agencies that flowed through here. One of those contracts was to do surveys of individuals, $830 million for surveys. And so part of the question was, hey, could we actually see the surveys? And then the surveys came back, and a survey was like 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper with 10 questions that anyone's child in junior high could have put together, or AI could have done for free. $830 million. So that's one that we've stopped. And that contract was going out after you were inaugurated, sir. So
Yeah.
it was
So
jumping.
it's a pure fraud.
Yeah.
It's a fraud.
Who did that? Are you kidding me? 10 questions, 800, and what did he say, $23 million? Am I getting that right? That's astounding. Wow. Before Trump got in office, the federal government was a great place to work. I have to say, I understand why so many people are upset about getting fired. This sounds like a fantastic place to work. If you're working any job right now, and you can make pivots to start working in the federal government on some level, you should be doing that. I'm just saying. Like, if by the sounds of it, they're just going to be like, I don't know where the $1 billion went. We put it in some account. It's just going to be in your account. And they're not even going to look for it. They're going to be like, I don't know. And then when Elon Musk finds it, he's going to be like, we're taking this money back. And you're going to be like, okay. While you're just covered in gold chains and diamonds, on a yacht.
But we've had many fraudulent contracts that were caught by the work that Elon and his people are doing, and working with our people. It's been brought to light that the fraud, not just waste and abuse, the fraud has been incredible. You mentioned one, Madam Secretary.
Well, yes, sir. Well, let me just add to that, and thank you. We just had a wonderful cabinet meeting, all aligned on certainly the effort to realign the government. But even at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, we've canceled a $300,000 contract educating on food justice for queer and transgender farmers in San Francisco. A similar contract we canceled in New York, again, educating transgender and queer farmers on food justice and food equality. I'm not even sure what that means, but apparently the last administration wanted to put our taxpayer dollars towards that. We canceled a $600,000 contract out of Louisiana that was studying the menstrual cycles of transgender men, a $600,000 contract. We canceled another contract out of a university in the middle of the country that focused on getting more diversity, equity, and inclusion into our pest management industry. Again, these are nonsensical. It makes zero sense to use taxpayer dollars to fund these. I know these are just a few examples of the hundreds and hundreds that we have found.
Well, a clear case of fraud was with the Small Business Administration, where they were handing out loans, $330 million worth of loans to people under the age of 11. I think the youngest, Kelly, was a 9-month-old who got a $100,000 loan. That's a very precocious baby we're talking about here.
What? How? See, this is what I mean. Whose baby was that? And how did they get somebody took that baby's name, okay? And somebody wrote the baby's name down, and then someone else just cleared the loan. Who did all that? Again, I want to know who's doing all the things. I like hearing about the fraud. I like that because that means they're finding it. That means it'll stop. But who are these people? I want to meet the transgender farmers. Am I the only one? Huh? Am I the only one that wants to meet transgender farmers? Not that there are none. There has to be some. There has to be. Pest control as well. You know, they work jobs, but let's see them. Let's see who these people are. I guess it all is just fraud.
We're tackling the fraud, waste, and abuse in the agency. We've seen, hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud go unprosecuted, so we're taking that on. We have a zero tolerance policy for fraud, and we continue to crack down on it and make sure people are held accountable.
It's amazing. And you have a lot of that. You found far too much of it. It's a pure fraud. We like to use the words waste and abuse because they sort of sound good, but many of these things are pure fraud. Now, there was a contract that you've heard about where Stacey Abrams got $2 billion just before we took over, and it was a rush to get her the money, and that was environmental, and nobody knows what she was doing. But $2 billion. If you got $2 million, that's a lot. If you got 200,000, that's a lot. But this was $2 billion was given. Lee, do you want to talk about that? And the other one that was even worse?
EPA has now canceled over $22 billion worth of contracts. $2 billion going to this NGO that Stacey Abrams was tied to. They received only $100 in 2023. And then the Biden administration gave them $2 billion. The director of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund saw his former employer get $5 billion. So $20 billion went to just 8 NGOs, and they're all pass-throughs. And then they were giving it to other entities, many of them were pass-throughs. And what you have is all these extra middlemen, they're taking their cut. And the taxpayer ends up getting screwed. They're losing out on all this hard-earned money. They can't afford to have the federal government waste. The partnership with Doge and Elon Musk has been incredible at EPA. Their team is very talented. We wouldn't have been able to do it without them. And of course, this mandate from President Trump to make sure that we identify every last penny, whether we're saving $50,000, $5 million, or $22 billion. We will not rest until every last penny is saved. Thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity to do this for the American public.
Thank you.
If this conversation was happening anywhere else, if it wasn't in this government building with the president, you'd be like, oh, these guys are just tinfoil hat wearers. These guys don't even have their Speedos on. They're just skinny dipping in the deep, just tinfoil hats on. That's it. That's all they got on. That's what you would say about these people if they were saying that out loud without it. This sounds so crazy. And it's been going on for so long. It's wild. $2 billion. And then someone gets $5 billion. And then here's the thing. Is there no way that they can say, hey, we don't understand why you received the $2 billion. There's a real push for it. It's to this whole environmental thing. That's fine. Since you're connected to it and we don't understand what's going on, we have to look into your bank account. Are you not allowed to do that for a federal employee? I feel like federal employees should have to give it up in that way. There should be complete explanations of why they have money, if they're involved with big amounts of money. I don't know. That's just me.
Great job, you know. So we have a lot of that. We're getting down to a point we think probably over the next 2 or 3 months we'll be pretty much satisfied with the people that are working hard and want to be members of the administration and our country, really. And they're doing a lot of good people. We have a lot of great people. We want to keep the good ones, and we want to get rid of the ones that don't exist, and we want to get rid of the ones that do exist but don't work. And we have quite a few of them. Would anybody else like to say something before we take some questions from the press, please? Doug Collins.
Yes, Mr. President, I think one of the things that you've always told me is take care of our veterans, and that's what we're doing at the VA. And one of the things, though, is you also have to know who your employees are. You have to know the very fact of who you are. We're 470,000 roughly when we started this, larger than the active duty Army, when you think about that in the perspective. But however, this is an interesting point. When I first got there and we started looking at this, how you take care of people, we didn't have an HR system that could actually give us a rundown on who actually was working where. that we've had to work with, working with our VA employees who are those liaisons, we've been able to put together an organizational chart which we can start looking at that. But the interesting part about it is about taking care of veterans, and what you've told me to do is how do we get the people in the right places? And I think when we look at this, GAO has told us we were high risk for years. The previous administration put literally tens of billions of dollars and tens of thousand employees over the last 4 years, and we saw our statistics basically stay the same or go down. Backlogs went up. You know, maybe the question is not money and employees anymore. Maybe it's the organization and how we effectively deliver for the American people. And that's what we're going to do.
Well said.
And, you know, one thing I want to add to it, it is not necessarily a very popular thing to do. You know, you're talking about employment, you're talking about people and the lives of people. And yet, I think the American public understands we're trying to save our country and make our country great again. I mean, you could say it, but we're trying to save our country from this extraordinary thing that was happening. What they were doing to our country was just a horrible thing. And I have no idea how it plays out in the public. I guess you see poll numbers that are very good numbers, but I don't know what that means long term. But it's something that has to be done. If we don't do it, we're not going to have much of a country left, so we have to do it. So we're doing things that I think a lot of presidents wouldn't be inclined to do, but we're doing it to really, you know, I don't want to use cliche. I don't want to say we're doing it to make America great again, because I say that on the campaign trail, but there's really no other words that could express it better than that. We're doing it to help our country, and our country was riddled with fat, like no country probably anywhere in the world, and we're getting rid of the fat. And at the same time, we're going to be bringing in millions of very good, high-paying jobs, and we're going to be taking in a lot of money. Our country's going to be very strong. We've been ripped off by every country in the world, friend and foe. We were taken advantage of like nobody's ever seen. And you saw what happened today with Venezuela. We did something with Venezuela, which is long in the making, and it's very substantial. And we'll be announcing cars very shortly, and we already announced steel, as you know, and aluminum. We'll be announcing pharmaceuticals at some point in the not too distant, because we have to have pharmaceuticals. We don't make pharmaceuticals anymore in our country. And if we have problems like wars or anything else, we need steel, we need pharmaceuticals, we need aluminum, we need a lot of these things that we sort of don't make anymore, and yet we're equipped to do it all. So we'll be announcing some of these things in the very near future, not the long future, the very near future. And it'll bring in billions of dollars, billions and billions, and it'll bring in, maybe more importantly, jobs. It'll protect the jobs we have, and it's going to be really quite amazing. Chris, did you have something to say?
Trump's getting ready for war. You hear that? That's what it sounds like. I wonder. You know, pharmaceuticals right now, I think it's still this way. You know, everybody found out in 2020 and was very shocked that China was making most of the pharmaceuticals, right? Which is so crazy, because they could just tamper with them if they wanted to. You know, I'm not saying that's what's going on, but they could pretty easily. So I wonder if he's getting ready, because, you know, there's been a bit of a rumor, which was seen as false, that they are saying that Elon was going to be briefed on a war plans with China when he went to the Pentagon. They said that was completely false. Pete Hegseth said it was false. Trump said it was false. He said there's a conflict of interest a little bit because Elon does business with China. But there has been talks about war plans with China. I have no idea what that looks like, what could possibly be happening there. But Trump is in a rush to make sure that America is independent pretty much in every way. He's let Canada know, don't need anything from Canada. Right now, with what he's saying here, he's telling us that he doesn't want to have to depend on China for anything. Energy-wise, he's going for that himself as well. That touches on Canada again, because a lot of the electricity in the upper states is actually supplied by Ontario. If you didn't know that, that's why the Premier of Ontario threatened to cut the lights off, which would actually be kind of an act of war, because people could pass away if you do that. So Trump's not taking any nonsense anymore. And he's on the cusp of gaining Greenland. I mean, as much as he's the president of peace, he's getting war ready from what I can see. Interesting, man.